The Seams of the Universe. A 4ACO DMT trip report by Jake. Posted to earwid.org, August 27th, 2010. Note: I do not recommend taking this higher dose, and the only reason I'm writing this is for informational and research purposes. Earwid note: the dose described in this report is very high, potentially beyond Earwid's heavy range, and could pose serious health risks or result in unwanted extreme effects. Sometimes extremely high doses reported are errors rather than the actual doses used. A little background knowledge. I do not have very many friends. I don't have any close family, and I suffer from severe anxiety and depression. I know this is not a great combination for psychedelic use, but every previous trip I have managed to keep myself together and enjoy it. LSD, mushrooms, 2CXs. I have a girlfriend per se. We are basically together, but we don't call ourselves boyfriend and girlfriend yet. We have a lot of history, dated a fair few times, and I do trust her a lot. Setting: my room, soft yellow lamp, bare white walls, computer, sound system, large bed. The time was about 8 PM, and that day I had received a package containing my next substance for experimenting with, 4-acetoxy DMT. Next to nothing is really known about this chemical when it reaches doses above 40 milligrams, which is one of the reasons why I decided it would be a good choice. I had downloaded some new 60s albums the day before in preparation for this event, some more Pink Floyd, Brian Wilson's Smile, and the Jefferson Airplane album, and had them on a playlist set on shuffle. I weighed up a generous dose, as I thought it would be the same as most other psychedelics with an up dose, just a more intense version than the lower. I popped it into a cap and downed it with some Gatorade. My concept of time was blurred through this whole thing, so I'll just try and keep everything structured as best I can. After downing the cap, I returned to my PC, where I spent some time chatting to some people on IRC. I didn't know how long the average come up for this substance was, so I decided to just act as if I wasn't about to experience anything. That way, time might go a little quicker. Big mistake. It was around 30 minutes later when I developed a craving for some ice cream. I emerged from my room to the refrigerator, where I found a cornetto that looked absolutely amazing to me. This seemed slightly odd to me though, as I never eat ice cream at all. I returned once again to my room and turned on the heater as I was feeling cold, probably due to the ice cream. I hopped back on IRC to announce the awesomeness of my cornetto. In less than a minute the cornetto was gone. I'd eaten it so fast, and it just tasted so wonderful, that I craved even more ice cream. This is about the time where I assumed the drug kicked in. I grabbed a tub of Rocky Road style ice cream, which I eat on an even rarer occasion than cornettos, and a spoon as well. I sat back in my room and consumed each spoonful with pleasuring relish. With every gulp, a grin that even the Cheshire Cat would envy got wider and wider, and the euphoria was beyond belief. I soon realised why I never ate this particular ice cream though. It made me sick as fuck. And right at that moment I realised I was about to be hit full force with the power that is nausea and psychedelics. The music started to shift tones rather randomly. It was as if there was a barrier between the speakers and my ears that drastically morphed music and sound. I rolled onto my bed with great difficulty, but eventually managed to get myself facing upwards. I completely forgot what drug I took by this point, which was probably one of the worst parts of this whole experience. Not knowing what is happening, and why things are happening, or what is making them happen in the first place, is a very scary experience indeed. By this point, the song that was playing was Pink Floyd's Speak to Me. I knew the lyrics, and as soon as the line was sung, a sudden realization crept up on me that I really had no idea who or what I was trying to be, or what I was even doing with my life. This may seem a little confusing, because I'm trying to put these thoughts into words, but I expect that some things will be too over-exaggerated to understand. The next thing I remember was attempting to sit up in my bed, also a bad idea. I checked my phone to see that I had received 2 messages. One from the close girlfriend, who we'll call B, and one from another close friend who we'll call A, who knew I was going to be tripping that night. I could not work out how to reply and felt an extreme sense of failure because of all this. I managed to message B with a simple "I love you," and then tried to get out of bed. A wave of an extremely powerful force pushed inwards on me, and I had the intense feeling of collapsing into myself. This may not seem that bad, but for me it was absolutely horrifying, as I had no recollection of if this drug should be doing this to me, because I couldn't remember what fucking drug I'd even taken in the first place. I kept trying to get back up and just failing. It was like a constant bass drop from a really bad dubstep song, all the while receiving messages from A that made absolutely no sense to me at the time. She even seemed rather pissed at me, or sad. I didn't even know why. The word "please" kept looping in my head, and I felt the nausea die down a little, and thankfully so did the force pushing down on me. I somehow managed to return to a somewhat sane state of mind, as I lay in the fetal position telling myself not to freak out and that I was just tripping. Kinda worked. Until, strangely, the next song on Dark Side of the Moon came on, "Breathe in the Air," and I immediately felt more bad vibes coming on as it started. The audio hallucinations were extremely intense, and when it was at the part where the vocals are singing, I was hallucinating so much that I thought it was saying, "Sleep, sleep while you can." As you can probably imagine, this was a very unpleasant thing to be told through a song. I tried closing my eyes to focus on calming down, but every time I closed them, I felt that force sucking my entire existence inwards. I told myself it would be over eventually, but in this whole time only 20 minutes had passed. My heart was racing, and I honestly thought I was dying. I lay there staring at my walls, watching them melt into nothingness, and soon everything was gone. It was just me and nothing else. I was dead for certain. My heart sped up even more, and I thought it was about to shut down. I had impulsive thoughts to yell out to my mother, who was asleep, but thankfully resisted them. I was convinced there was no such thing as time, because at that point, there was nothing. I could move forward and backward in a sort of historical dimension that was completely different to anything I'd ever experienced. It was as if everything in my life was written down or recorded in my head somewhere, and I could relive any portion of it. After snapping back to fearful reality, the music was unbearable. I lunged over to my computer and turned it off at the power supply. Silence. Well, except for the monotonous hum from my heater. It was comforting somehow. I switched off the lamp and lay in darkness, fading between reality and some unknown time-space dimension that I wanted so desperately to escape. For the next 30 minutes, I shifted my eyes around the room, closing them every 5 minutes or so as the hallucinations were confusing my mind and my eyes. Strong patterns were swirling amongst the white paint in the walls, and most surfaces were made up of neon pink, purple and green colours. I decided I could calm down a little more if I could use my phone to talk to someone. But first I needed music I was more familiar with. I put on Between the Buried and Me's colours and grabbed my phone. I texted B and tried to maintain a decent conversation until I assumed she fell asleep as she was no longer replying. Bad vibes were conjuring back up as I was left with only my mind, so I signed into MSN to find that A was online. I said something along the lines of, bad trip, talk about anything, please, just anything, keep talking to me." A is extremely inexperienced with any drugs, so she handled this very well, and it certainly made the difference between me taking a trip to the ER and staying reasonably sane. It didn't really matter to me what she was saying, it just had importance to me, as I knew if I could still read something someone was sending me at that time, it meant I still existed, I guess. I managed to start conversations with a few other people. One guy I knew from school, we'll call him C, and another that owns an electronic music blog, D, that I'd become friends with. I started having a conversation about starting a band with C, and he agreed it was a good idea. I mentioned having a funny name like Moshwar and Destructor, and he laughed. The thing that weirded me out though was that I was talking to D at this time as well, but had stopped for a few minutes, when he sends me a message saying, "I don't know what Destructor means." I had absolutely no idea how he managed to see that or how I even sent it to him, but I quickly closed the conversation to avoid freaking out yet again. By this time, the nausea was almost gone. The visuals were the most intense I'd ever experienced at this period. My walls were made of neon geometry, all shimmering and morphing beautifully. I could not stare at my hands as they just kept morphing to looking like these horse hooves, which also kind of freaked me out. I suspect turning into a horse would freak most people out, to be honest. But overall, I was coping relatively well now. I decided I needed a shower, which was also a bad idea. I think everything I did in this trip was a bad idea. So I slid out of bed, very hippie-esque, kind of like a DXM walk but with more of a strut to it. I made it to the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. My pupils had taken up the entire iris of each eye, and I looked, well, very alien-like. I had a hard time recognizing myself. I got into the shower and enjoyed the warm water. It felt amazing, and it seemed as though it was washing off all the bad vibes and thoughts of the trip. I decided it was time to get out, but as I reached for a towel, the nausea came back in a hefty wave. And so did the visuals. I ended up back on my shower floor with a towel wrapped around me, getting soaked by the warm water again. I breathed at a steady pace while watching the bathroom walls turn purple and green. Now I look back on it, the visuals throughout the entire trip were fucking amazing, but I couldn't enjoy them to the full extent because of that damn nausea. Finally, I managed to get up and out, and felt a lot better. I spent the rest of the night on IRC and MSN chatting about simple things that made me quite happy. I was grinning most of the time after the shower, which reminded me of all the pleasant mushroom trips I've had, which in turn made me more happy. The next morning, I felt completely normal. No hangover, no perception changes, except for that slight increase in HPPD, which was to be expected with such a high dose. All in all, I don't think I'm ever going to take 4-ACO DMT again, at least in this high of a dose. I may try this substance again in the future at a much lower dose and post a follow-up report. In conclusion though, I do hope that this information is helpful to anyone considering doing a heroic dose themselves. I thought I'd give a little addendum to this trip report. Many of you may know that I've written a few of my own trip reports. You can find them on my personal stories, or there's a compilation of all my trip reports that I've written for the channel. And one of them, the most insane one that literally has completely changed my entire life. I mean, they all changed my entire life, but this one was beyond anything I've ever experienced in my life. I tell a lot of people that I became the galaxy brain meme. I took 90 milligrams of 4-ACO DMT unbeknownst to me. I was only supposed to take 60 milligrams. I'd taken it once before 4-ACO DMT at an unknown dose. I assume it was 25. And if you want to find out more about that trip, please watch the video. I'll link it in the description. Or just watch the compilation that I recently put together. It'll give you a greater insight into my own heroic dose experiences and mystical states that I've been through in my life. But this one completely rewired everything. I can now never smoke weed ever again. It makes me trip. This is why I sort of giggle when people scoff at others talking about weed trips and the psychedelic effects of weed, because it definitely is a psychedelic for me now, let me tell you. I don't get visuals, but I go straight into that 4-ACO DMT headspace, but not in a good way. I get the existential terror of weed. So I took 90 milligrams and my experience was a lot more mystical than this person's. I'm very surprised this person didn't go through complete and total ego death, but as I've said, everyone's wired up very differently. We all have unique genetics, and we've all had various experiences of psychedelics. And yes, some people just won't reach ego death even on a heroic dose like this. I definitely had ego death and beyond on 90 milligrams. And I sort of had the same experience as him, where nothing was pleasant. Like I was watching a film and it just had this sinister vibe. I tried distracting myself with music and it just felt alien, and I just really did not help the experience at all. And finally, when I let go and just gave in to the silence, I sort of got in the fetal position in my bed. And before I knew it, as I embraced the experience and let go of myself, I was not me anymore. I was not a human. I became this galaxy consciousness. I actually felt like I became a Milky Way type substance. I just felt like I became this swirling galaxy of consciousness and energy, and I perceived this purple woman who was telling me that everything was going to be alright, and that my whole life had been leading up to this moment, and everything's love, and all of the fear that I have and will end up falling back into is illusory, and it's just something that I need to navigate as a soul to truly transcend the confines of the human condition. It's been many years since that, and I've never had an experience like that since. I've had some pretty out there mushroom trips, but only a handful. It frightened me from tripping for quite a long time, you know. Even though the experience was beautiful, it was just quite a lot for my human ego self to wrap its head around, and I wrap my head around it every single day, and the more I discover about the experience, the more I realise I don't know anything about any of this psychedelic consciousness stuff, and I'm just doing my best to find out about myself and hopefully help other people along that journey. So yeah, if you're interested in my own experience, please go and watch that video. I'll link it in the description. It'll probably give you a greater insight into what I'm doing with this channel, because I know I read a lot of these mystical experiences. I love the mystical experiences, and let me tell you, I'm only doing these nightmare trip reports and train wrecks and difficult experiences for October because I love Halloween and I like getting in the spirit. I know a lot of people are really gagging for the positive reports to come back, so let me tell you, November will be full of them, because I do like to maintain a balance on here, but I do also respect that people do enjoy the shocking reports. It's just the internet, isn't it? I know how it is. I also am a slave to shocking content because it just interests me. So yep, basically don't mess about with 4-ACO DMT in higher doses unless you're a veteran psychonaut, and even if you are, don't always assume that you can bite off more than you can chew. So, hope this was a lesson learnt for the person in question, and for you guys as well. Thank you for sticking around for the spooky month of October, and don't worry, in the next few days we'll be back to the glowing mystical experiences that we all know and love, and that I really love the most sharing on the channel. My favourite stuff is the mystical stuff by far. Intrigues me the most, and it's so beautifully profound, and I understand why you guys want it back. Thank you all, love you so much, and have a happy Halloween.